All right, so here we go. Yes, we've got some brand new details without spoilers, by the way, about Dragon's Dogma 2. We've got new interviews with Capcom, and yes, the actual release times for console and PC, but also very big warnings about this game because the character creator is so much more important than you first realize. It's not just cosmetic, that is very, very key. And there's also very hidden mechanics in the game that influence your character throughout. So we'll talk about that. And what about the armor system? That has seen some major changes since the first game, so what's going on there? And yes, we're going to be talking about difficulty and the end game content. Again, Capcom has been very vocal about this stuff. Also, they are teasing things as well. And yeah, we're going to talk about all of that. But yeah, first, check this out right here. So yes, I have to admit, I like to game and snack at the same time, but I don't want to worry about pricey fees when ordering in. And I don't want to be stuck in the kitchen preparing a meal or cleaning up afterwards. I want to be able to sit back, relax, and enjoy my gaming time with something good to eat. So I have a perfect solution to enjoy delicious, guilt-free, easy to prepare snacks and meals while saving a ton of money. It's called HelloFresh. And yes, they're doing an incredible deal. Free dessert for life for active subscribers. And not only are their meal kits tasty and healthy, but guess what? They save me time and money. And gone are the days that I have to worry about standing in line at a crowded grocery store. And get this, there's variety with HelloFresh's meal plans. You can have breakfast, lunch, and dinner covered, and you never have to worry about getting bored. Choose from over 45 weekly recipes and over 100 curated picks from the HelloFresh market. Ingredients travel from the farm to your door so you know they're fresh. So join me right now and don't worry about a messy kitchen. Save time and money. Click that link in the description below and use my code OWG16FM and receive 16 free meals plus free dessert for life while your subscription is active. So yes, click that link down below to get started, and a very special thank you to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video. So yeah, I say we start with those global release times. As you can see right here, Steam has a little bit of an advantage ahead of consoles. You guys can pause the screen so you can determine when it releases for you. As you can see, it's between March 21st and March 22nd. Here's the PS5 and Xbox Series X and S, those times right there. So hopefully that gives you an idea as to when you can actually start playing this one. I cannot wait. I can't believe it's already here. I am so hyped. Now, let's go ahead and talk about how big Dragon's Dogma 2 is compared to Dragon's Dogma 1 in terms of size, scope, and the open world. Let's just say it's very big. Here's the question that IGN asked, and the response from Capcom. It says, as far as map size, I said I wanted it to be at least 1.5 times bigger or even twice as big if possible than, of course, the first game. And it ended up being roughly 4 times as big by the time we were done. That's not a precise measurement, but I'd say there's about quadruple the volume. So yeah, that's pretty wild. Also, considering that there's limited fast travel options in this game. More on that in just a moment. Some of you might frown upon that, but trust me, I think a lot of you will absolutely love how they have done this in Dragon's Dogma 2. So yes, we can clearly see the world is going to be ginormous in this one, but that's not what makes an open world game interesting. You could have the biggest world ever, but it could sadly be just boring. So how is Capcom going to be approaching the open world and making it interesting? That was one of the questions that was asked to them in this new interview from RGJ.com. And trust me, this interview gets very interesting. They go over brand new details, hidden mechanics, stuff like that. So we'll get into that in just a moment. But here is the response from Capcom about how they're making this open world very interesting. It says, also, as far as getting to one destination, we prepared multiple routes. We also prepared points of emphasis along the way so you can have multiple options, and it would be difficult to experience them all at once. So it seems like there's high replay value here. So even though you're visiting the same place, you'll get different experiences and find different things. One of the things we also emphasize is that when you visit one location, the enemies don't show up in the same way, but show up in varied ways, so that even though you visit the same location multiple times, it will still provide some value to the player. And I love this. And then you got to remember, you mix in the day and night cycle with this game, where day versus nighttime is very, very different in terms of enemy variety and danger. I love that aspect. And you really also have to make sure you're prepared for both day and night equally. And I think that's going to change up exploration a lot more as well. So I think that's pretty cool. Now, furthermore, they go on to say this as well. Here's the question. It says, does picking either a human or beast-ring character affect the actual story? Will there be multiple character slots, or are we limited to one character and one save file? Here's the response from Capcom. So the main storyline is the same for both, whether your main character is human or bestian. However, some minor details as to how your character proceeds in the game and how other characters treat your character, those will have differences depending on whether your main character is human or bestian. And this could be opening up some very cool role-playing themes as well. You might roam into areas that give you more accessibility when it comes to being either human or bestian. I'm kind of curious to see how this is going to play out because they really tapped more into the role-playing element, even more so than the first Dragon's Dogma. But hold up now, we got to take a step back because some of you might be concerned that you have one save file, one character. So what's going on there? Well, I have good news about how they're going to actually handle that. So don't panic too much. Check it out right here. It says, regarding your question about multiple characters, the game features one save slot. It's one character per player and one main pawn per player. However, the looks and characteristics of both the main player and the main pawn can be modified throughout the game by going to specific locations that allow that option. That said, based on what we just mentioned about there being minor differences between you selecting your main character as human or bestian and how other characters perceive you, the one thing that you cannot change is the race of your main character, whether your main character is human or bestian. That's the one aspect that you won't be able to change because that impacts how characters perceive you. So I guess that one element is going to be super important, whether you're going to be human or bestian. That's going to be absolutely critical, cemented. You can't change that going forward. But it is noteworthy that, yes, you can change elements of your main character as you progress throughout the adventure. And you got to remember that, yeah, you're thinking, well, I want to be a fighter and then I want a save slot for being a mage or an archer. Well, you can change up your vocation throughout your experience and upgrade all of them and ultimately get to the warfarer vocation. That's going to be where you can really mix and match things. That's going to be very cool. And mentioning vocations, that was another question. It says here, so far, 10 vocations have been revealed. Are there more vocations than that? And the response is, so currently we have 10 vocations announced, and that's as much as we currently have plans for at this point right now. But I got to say, it would be cool to see some sort of DLC, more vocations added. Now, another question is, are you able to talk about the change to the armor system and the reasons behind them? It seems like it has been simplified. Is the under armor or clothing layer gone? Will there eventually be a transmog options, and will players be able to do equipment presets? And this is where it gets kind of interesting. I'm curious to see how you guys respond to this one. So here is what Capcom had to say. It says, so for Dragon's Dogma 2, we changed the armor system and simplified it with the goal that people choose different things to have more visual variety. We wanted to balance it in a way so that people wouldn't end up always choosing the same things. In that regard, we added more variety and simplified the system. Rather than having an inner and outer, we divided the equipment for the upper half of the body and the lower half of the body. We added helms and capes. Now that's pretty cool that you can layer it on with helms and capes. There are some presets, but overall, well, something that happened in the previous game at high levels was that people would go for the same kind of equipment in the end. This time, we made a conscious goal of trying to create something that even at high levels, people would be encouraged to choose different things. So there will be some visual variety into what people were choosing. So yeah, they want variety. And I think still people would want transmog. I'm just going to say, I still think that people would want that as an option. But I get where they're coming from. You definitely don't want everyone looking similar. As long as all the gear looks cool and there's a wide variety, on offer, I'm not going to complain at all. But it is smart not to have like the best looking gear, the first gear you receive, and you're like, I got to stick with that. However, if that's something that you want to do, I feel like that should be a choice, and that's why I always prefer transmog. That's just me. That's how I am. Let me know if you guys want to have them add transmog later down the road. They don't mention that that's in the plans, but it still would be really, really cool. But at least gear really, really does matter in this game. Now, let's talk a little bit about in-game, because it seems like they have planned something very, very special for the in-game, so much so they don't want to spoil it. Here's what they had to say about that. They said, in-game is something that we cannot comment on right now. because we don't want to spoil it. So please just look forward to it. And the response was this. So does that mean you also can't answer any question about the Eternal Fairy Stone returning as well? And they say, I don't know about that. And if you don't know what fairy stones are, that's one of the fast travel mechanics in the game, using fairy stones and that sort of thing. But they really want to limit that. They want you to explore the world and embrace it on foot. I compare it to Lord of the Rings, that big sprawling adventure where by the end of it, or the midway point even, you're exhausted and you have to make camp and you have time to perhaps like rest and talk to your buddies and plan accordingly. That's how I think they're approaching Dragon's Dogma 2, and I really love that. Now, furthermore, here's another question here. It says, what is your favorite vocation in the game and why? Hear me out. This gets very interesting about the mage and sorcerer. Now it says, initially the sorcerer was my favorite vocation, but lately I've been enjoying the warfarer. Personally, I really enjoy doing multicasting, which is when multiple characters invoke magic at the same time. You can do this with sorcerer, and you're able to do that with the mage too, and it makes the spell more powerful if you release it at the same time. However, if you get a party of 4 sorcerers, then healing becomes quite a headache. It can actually be pretty challenging. But if you make your party with a warfarer plus sorcerers, then you could do healing while multicasting. I find that idea to actually be quite fun and exciting. But yeah, if you put together a party like that, wolves and hobgoblins will wipe your party. It's really strong against bosses though. But you can see here, you're not forced into having to be like, you have to have a fighter, an archer, a mage, and then whatever, like a thief. You don't have to do that. You can like have all fighters, for example, though that would be very risky if you're, say, going up against flying creatures. You're definitely going to want to, I think, diversify a little bit. But if you run into certain bosses and you know that they're going to be returning in that area, maybe it would be wise to take on this tactic of having like warfarer as your central class and then a bunch of sorcerers around you. That would actually be really, really cool. And it seems like you can customize your pawns and your companions to be geared towards more like supporting you in the healing way, and then having some pawns being on the attack. So I could see that working very well with a group of sorcerers. That could actually be really cool. Now, here is another question. It says, how are character stats determined in Dragon's Dogma 2? Is it pretty much the same as before? Do you have a base stat now, or is it mostly based on your vocation or leveling? Do players have more freedom to pick or allocate them? Will it be possible to reset or reallocate them? Very good question indeed. So let's see the response here. Goes on to say this right here. I guess your question is asking how stats increase and grow, right? So it works in a similar way. It's based on the vocation. However, one of the things that we tried to adjust is to make sure that it doesn't feel like your stats are capped. We made adjustments in a way that your stats wouldn't get stalled based on your level. However, players won't be able to reallocate their stats freely. So that's important to note right there. It seems like this game is very much about your actual ability sets for your current loadout. And then you got to remember the chemistry with your actual pawns. It feels like that's what this game is about. And then on top of that, yes, the individual gear for yourself and your pawns. A lot of stuff going on there. Now, here is another one. It says, does a character body type still come with advantages and disadvantages? If I make a huge character, will there be areas I can't get into? And this is what I was speaking about beforehand in the video about the character creator being very, very important. It says this. So in Dragon's Dogma 2, you won't have any situations where you won't be able to enter a place because of your body type. However, body type will still have an impact on your character stats or characteristics. If your character is taller, then there will be characteristics that match that. If your character is shorter, there will be characteristics that match that. For example, body type can impact the amount of weight they can carry or how fast their stamina recovers. Also, the length of their limbs affect the speed in which they move or the reach of their attacks. And I think that would also probably influence how you actually climb on bosses and that sort of thing. But the key takeaway here is if you want to be able to carry a lot, which this game is very much about that, the first game was as well, you're going to want to create a bigger character and just know that going forward. But yeah, I say have fun with it. Don't worry about it too much. You do have your companions, which can also take on some of that weight, some of that load for you. So that's really important to remember. So in that regard, you can also think, maybe I can have some really super gigantic tall companions with me that take on that load. So if you do want to create like a thief that's more nimble looking and stuff, you can do that. Don't feel like you're forced into creating like a gigantic character all the time. So I do want to say that. Now, also, we have this question right here. Will you still be able to play catch with your pawn? How much freedom do players have in designing their pawn? So the response is yes, you can play catch with your pawn. Also, one of the main themes of the pawns is their individuality. Based on what a pawn is like, you can figure out what kind of person created the pawn, right? So that's something that we stress this time too. The more characteristics we have available, the more options players have to make their own pawn unique. And we wanted to emphasize that. And I love how each pawn has their own personalities. They did go on to state that some pawns will be able to go out and find a lot of, loot for you, so you don't have to go search it. Some pawns may have knowledge of the area because they have previously been there in other players' worlds. So yeah, you can get some pawns that are very experienced about their surroundings. Now, let's keep going. So it says this is a good one. It says, in terms of consumer friendliness, will there be a need for a constant internet connection? Will there be any microtransactions? And if so, how will they be applied? Here's the response. The game can be played offline. However, in order to hire pawns from other players, you'll need to be online, and that's definitely encouraged. In terms of microtransactions, Dragon's Dogma 2 has DLC, like a boon for adventurers, which will be available in the deluxe edition, but will also be available as DLC when the game releases. Some of the elements include rift crystals and wake stones, which are included in the deluxe edition, and will also be released as individual DLC in limited amounts per account. So yeah, this is completely optional. It's definitely not a pay to win type deal, of course. It is a single player game, so if you want to do this, you can. You have the option, but hey, it's not going to really influence the game. So it's just another way for perhaps Capcom to potentially fund an expansion. So hey, if they do an expansion, which I really, really do hope, by the way, that they actually do an expansion. But yeah, what about the difficulty? Let's get into that and talk about that more. So here's the question. How difficult or challenging is the game going to be? Is it going to be mostly like the first game? Do you have options to pick your difficulty? Has there been any changes in balancing compared to the first game for consumables like Throw Blast, which kind of became game breaking? Great question. And the response is this right here. It's a pretty hard game compared to the previous one. Usually, difficulty is determined by factors such as time required, the technique required, and the knowledge required. We made a conscious effort to reduce the elements that depend on time required. In terms of the difficulty as an action game, one change that we've made is putting in a system that optimizes the difficulty according to the player. We also feel that we've successfully added some difficulty that people will enjoy as far as the role-playing elements that require you to play a character within a specific role. So they didn't really answer if there's going to be multiple difficulty options. It almost sounds like more of a dynamic difficulty setting. And I remember a game that did this so well was Sleeping Dogs. I really did love that because in Sleeping Dogs, if you failed over and over again, the game was like, we'll back off of you for now. But if you go on a streak, we're going to up the difficulty. So I'm curious to see how this is going to work and if people really enjoy it. But I have a feeling they've also seen the success of games like Elden Ring, the Souls franchise, and they want to make it challenging, but it doesn't sound like they want to make it too Souls-like. They want to make it fun still, not to say that Elden Ring isn't fun or anything, but I don't think they want to put it on that absolute level, of difficulty. So I'm curious to see how this one pans out in that regard. I personally do want it to be challenging, especially when it comes to those boss fights. But yeah, there it is. The latest happenings around Dragon's Dogma 2. I am counting down the hours over here until release. Remember, check out the release schedule. I'll throw links in the description below so you can find out your release time for your time zone. But thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned here for more Dragon's Dogma 2. I have you guys covered. I hope to release some cool tips and tricks videos. Nothing spoilerific, by the way. I think that I really, really want to keep this one completely spoiler free for you all. But thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for more, and I will see you all next time. Take care.